In January 1840, François Lelièvre and a handful of French and German immigrants gathered together in the French port of Le Havre in Normandy to travel on to the port of Rochefort in Brittany, where they were joined by more immigrants making ready to board the sailing ship Comte de Paris. And so it was that in March 1840 the Comte de Paris left Brittany in France, bound for New Zealand, a significant event in New Zealand's history, but of more importance, Paulette's history as a direct descendant of the original French settlers. Accompanied by husband John, Paulette commenced François' heritage trail in the 12th century township of Villedieu-du-Poêle, or just Villedieu. Spared from Allied bombing in World War II, this picturesque township boasts a population of 4,000, has the beautiful Church of Our Lady, erected from the 13th century but entirely rebuilt in the 15th century. Since around 1780, the village has become world famous for the manufacture of church bells, upwards of 450 a year. Well worth a tour of the factory. The comfortable Le Fruiterie Hotel in Villedieu was used as Paulette's base for the Heritage Trail, as all the villages of interest were conveniently within an average distance of only 7 kilometres from the township. There was no expectation of witnessing any village activity around midday on the Heritage Trail. Our previous experiences of village life were that most would be like ghost towns when visited during their 2-hour lunch break. Paulette's Heritage Trail began in the village of Sault-Chevray de Tronchet, or just Sault-Chevray. It was in this village that Guillaume Lelièvre, François' grandfather, and Paulette's great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was born on the 16th of March 1741. Sault-Chevray was not easy to locate, as it has been merged with Villedieu in 1974. The 11th century village had only a handful of houses, but we did spot the village name above a bus shelter. By chance, Paulette also spotted the lovely old Church of Holy Trinity, located on the outskirts of the village, down a narrow lane behind a belt of tall trees. Most of the village churches and chapels visited on the trail appeared well cared for by the parishioners. The Holy Trinity Church was no exception. Of real interest was the floor tombs, one dating back as far as 1717. In the church cemetery, many of the graves appeared abandoned. Some were of simple construction with no apparent names. A leisurely stroll around the cemetery made us appreciate just how the old church and its grounds really were in its quaint semi-rural setting. A grave bearing the name Famille Lelièvre was discovered in the cemetery, but unfortunately had no obvious attached dates. But it was exciting to discover the family name. Paulette's Heritage Trail took us on to the village of Montbray, where Guillaume married Paulette's great-great-great-great-grandmother, Anne Le Rossel, assumedly in the chapel of Saint-Pierre, located in the village square. Unfortunately, our research did not uncover the date of their marriage, but it would likely have been prior to 1777. Charming as it was, Montbray village and the chapel of Saint-Pierre gave us the impression of being trapped in a time warp since the late 1700s. It was also noticed that some of the farm buildings in the immediate district were in a derelict state, although to the village's credit there was a small, reasonably well maintained chateau on the fringe of the village which appeared to double as a schoolhouse. Unfortunately, we did not locate a cemetery in or around the village to check out any family names on graves. And so the Heritage Trail continued, this time onto the small village of Les Longs-de-Rue. This is where François' father, who was Paulette's great-great-great-great-grandfather, Michel, was born on the 10th of February 1777. Le Rendezvous was such a delight to visit. There was little or no history to research about the village, but from what was observed it would be reasonable to assume its history to be similar to nearby villages. The village and its neighbouring properties were all seen to be well cared for. The village church of Saint-Martin, with its well cared for grounds, was discovered down a nearby country lane. As a village church, Saint-Martin's appeared larger than the other village chapels and churches visited, exhibiting an impressive vaulted ceiling and stained glass windows. There was no great expectation of finding family graves in the cemetery. Like many of the old cemeteries visited, there was a large mix of recent burials and graves long since abandoned. However, it was nice to see the family names of Le Havre and Les Maisons engraved on a merged war memorial in the cemetery. Also discovered adjacent the church grounds was a small but beautiful chateau. What stories could be told of that property? Paulette's next stop on the Heritage Trail was the small, somewhat scattered village of Saint-Cécile. The French loved their flowers. Saint-Cécile was no exception. The village name was displayed in flowers adjacent the mayor's office. Where else, you may ask? Saint-Cécile was where Michel's wife and Paulette's great-great-great-great-grandmother, Jens Francois Le Maison, was born on the 26th of June 1781. The road through the village was much wider than others on the trail, likely because it was one of the main access roads to nearby Villejuif. The delightful church and cemetery of Saint-Cécile appeared to be about the same size and layout of Saint-Martin's in Le Rendezvous. Unfortunately, the church was closed on the day, but we did find an engraved family name of Le Havre on a church grave. Sadly, the last village on the Heritage Trail was Bayonne. It was here that Francois, Paulette's great-great-great-grandfather, was born on the 12th of January 1810. The Church of Notre Dame and its surrounding cemetery was central to the village. Over the road from Notre Dame was the mayor's office, and of course the compulsory barrissi. As expected, for its age, the church interior with its beautiful wooden pews, tiled floors, whitewashed walls, vaulted ceiling and a lovely stained glass windows were all in pristine condition, ready for a church service at any time. We were unaware of what must have been a recent storm in the district. Resultant damage to Notre Dame's stained glass window, buildings and surrounding properties and trees, some quite large, was testimony to his fury. As with many of the cemeteries that we spent time in, it took a while to locate any of Paulette's family. Persistence paid off with the discovery of the family name Le Havre and the date 1878 engraved on a headstone. That made the search worthwhile. There were numerous picturesque properties scattered around the village, many of which appeared to have been there for many centuries. Their gardens and neighbouring landscaping added to the village's charm. Completion of the mayor's office in 1861 was clear for all to see. A sizable war memorial had been erected beside the road leading into the village. With Bayonne being the last of our villages to visit, it had become apparent to us that the local residents took pride in keeping their villages exceptionally tidy, which is more than can be said of many French cities we have stayed in. The Heritage Trail would not have been complete without a visit to Francois's port of departure from Normandy, Le Havre. We did not expect to see the port of Le Havre as it would have been in 1840. The city had been heavily bombed by the Allies during World War II, and major changes to this massive port had obviously taken place since the war. The visit to Le Havre was more for closure. Here is where Francois and many of his fellow migrants gathered together to start a new life on the other side of the world, which, in the times they lived, must have been an epic decision. Paulette was so delighted to wear her Comme de Paris the Descendants group t-shirt on the day. The shirt with all 33 settler family names printed on the back was worn by the Descendants in 1990 at the 150th year landing celebrations in Akaroa. And so the heritage trail ended. Paulette was thrilled with her chance to visit the lovely countryside, villages and towns where her French ancestors lived all those years ago. The trail had given Paulette a real sense of her French lineage. Well, that was fun. Let's stop by my favourite cafe. Been a long few days. Au revoir to you all.